Hello, everyone, and welcome into the Sports Huddle Podcast, Episode 2, brought to you by Six Rivers Media, the only locally owned and family-operated media outlet in the region. I'm Dylan Young with my friends J.D. Vaughn, Jeff Birchfield, and Andrew Smith. We appreciate you all joining us today and tuning in to all the high school football action in the Tri-Cities and Scott County, Virginia. And y'all, we already got week 1 of Tennessee high school football behind us. We're opening up week 1 of Virginia high school football this week and going into week 2 of Tennessee this week. Man, we had some great games that happened in week 1, of course, that we were all at. You know, Science Hill got a big win. Dobyns-Bennett clutched it up for a good win. Westridge, another good win. And, of course, Andrew, you were over there with Johnson County showing off the triple option offense and their win. And we're going to get to those games here in a little bit. But first, we want to thank our sponsor, Lazy J Farms Old Fashioned Butcher Shop, for sponsoring the podcast.
Lazy J Farms has been raising the finest cattle and all-natural pork for 3 generations. Our blonde Aquitaine herd offers a leaner, healthier, and more tasteful beef that ships from our store directly to your freezer. This is the way your grandfather shot for meat, only now we wrap it, seal it, and send it right to your door. We have plenty of options to pick from, and they're all fresh and natural. Just visit our website at lazyjbeef.com and choose your package. We'll get it straight to you.
And y'all, we got a lot to talk about, so let's just jump right into it. And I think the first game we should touch on is last week's Six Rivers Media Sports Huddle Game of the Week, Science Hill at Elizabethton. Jeff, you were there covering that game. Of course, Science Hill won 35-14 in the 100th meeting of these two squads. What'd you see out there, Jeff?
Well, Science Hill, very impressive there in week 1. I think they piled up 505 yards of total offense. Baylor Necessary just had a monster game. You know, he was our player of the week this week, and also, you know, last year he was our defensive player of the year for the Johnson City Press and Kingsport Times News. He had 9 carries, though, for 168 yards on offense. 99 of those came on one play, the opening touchdown of the game. And even though Baylor's a big guy, 6'3", 220 pounds, man, he showed his speed right there toward, you know, the game. I mean, he pulled away, you know, from some of the defensive backs at Elizabeth and ran well. And then, like I said, the other Science Hill guys, they had about 360 yards on the ground. You know, had Aiden Perry, 10 carries for 125 yards, and Malik Anderson ended up having a touchdown run, you know. So Science Hill looked really impressive on both sides of the ball, you know. Stephen Famoyan, he had a big game, 7 catches, 58 yards on offense, and he also had a great game defensively. You know, he's a terrific defensive back for the Hilltoppers. And then, like you mentioned, the 100th meeting. So, I mean, really a special game there in Elizabethton, you know, with that great atmosphere. Of course, sold-out crowd like you would think.
Yeah. Did it kind of surprise you, the score, with the way Science Hill was able to control that game, especially with their offensive line and the running backs they had going?
Well, no, it was a close game, you know, for the first half. It was only 14-7 at the half. But it did surprise me a little bit the way Science Hill was able to take over the second half and really dominate the game, especially up front like that. I mean, that's in the past, you know, like we were talking last week, previewing the game, defensive front is usually a big strong suit for Elizabeth. And I think they'll still be fine. But, I mean, Science Hill's got a really good offensive line this year led by Gabe Hoffman, who's the son of Greg Hoffman, who's a former offensive lineman at the University of Louisville.
Yeah, and, of course, you know, having a great O-line like that in that Region 1 6A, you know, that plays a big factor, especially when you get those running backs going. And you talk about Baylor Necessary opening up the game on that 99-yard drive. That just kind of – that's just an exciting play to start a game like that. I mean, what was the atmosphere like when that happened?
Well, what had happened before that, Science Hill, Elizabeth had pinned them down on the 1-yard line with a punt, you know. So Elizabeth looked like they were getting the momentum in the game. And then when Necessary broke free on that, I mean, you know, it just completely changed the game at that point.
Yeah. And, of course, another big game that was happening in the area, Dobyns-Bennett invited Farragut over there to Dobyns-Bennett. Dobyns-Bennett finished the game, clutched it up 27-20. Great victory for the Tribe over there. JD, you were there Friday covering that game. Take me through the action, man. What happened there?
Well, Dylan, you know, Dobyns-Bennett this year, they're winning the close games, at least to this point, 1 weekend. And the fun fact, every team in the Big East Conference, Region 1 6A, is 1-0 this week. Last year, only Westridge and William Blount won their opening games. This year, everyone is 1-0 in Region 1 6A. Obviously, that can't last with conference play coming up in a couple of weeks. Dobyns-Bennett, oh my gosh, just what a game that was. Dobyns-Bennett jumps out to a 14-0 lead. Farragut scores 20 straight points. Dobyns-Bennett answers with a pair of touchdowns in the fourth quarter to get the win. But it may have come at a cost, though. Running backs Tegan Begley and Trey Wyndham both left the game with injuries, and they are both doubtful for this week against Greeneville. But someone who made a big impact in the second half was the tight end Peyton Franklin, moved from running back to tight end this year. Second half, he really made an impact. Finished with 107 yards on 8 catches, according to the official stats anyway. But he had the tying touchdown there in the fourth quarter, and just the impact he made. And then at the very end on defense, his interception stops Farragut's last drive. Dobyns-Bennett gets the win 27-20, so it's kind of like returning the favor. Now, if there was one thing of concern, it was a couple of times Dobyns-Bennett got burned for a long pass. And it was the same guy who burned him last year, a guy named Robbie Jacobs. He burned him for a 75-yard pass, and then he got free on a 19-yard fade route to help Farragut tie the game. So could that be a concern going forward if the other team is able to get guys in space against Dobyns-Bennett? If there is a concern, that might be it. But just for Dobyns-Bennett, talking to Joey Christian today, that was a game that they really tested their mettle, and this time they won the close game, something they didn't do last year.
Yeah, and we talked about that, in the first episode of just how Dobyns-Bennett, how many one-possession games they lost last year. This time, a one-possession game against Farragut, and they finished it out there. And I saw in your story, JD, about the third down conversions. They were having trouble converting on third down, but they did it when it mattered most there in the fourth quarter and was able to move the ball. I mean, that just shows some kind of mentality, some kind of grit, I would say, for quarterback Austin Sykes. Wouldn't you agree?
They were at one point, and they converted their first 4 third downs, and then they missed 7 in a row, so go figure. Yeah. But then they did. I don't think they missed another third down conversion the rest of the game. In fact, guess who? Peyton Franklin, when it's third and short with time running out, little play action, dump off pass to Peyton Franklin, first down, victory formation, ball game. So that's just the difference between to this point, Dobyns-Bennett able to finish the job in that close game. So big win for Dobyns-Bennett as they get ready to go to Greeneville for week 2. Obviously a non-region game, but this one's going to be a televised game, and we'll get to that in a minute. Stay tuned.
And, of course, that was a big win for the Tribe to start week 1 of the football season, just to show that they can finish those games, those close games. They, converted when it mattered most and clutched it up there against Farragut. Of course, the 27-20 win for DB. Another team, over here in Sullivan County, Westridge. As the season's changed, one thing doesn't really change. It's Westridge getting a big opening week win against Volunteer. This year, Westridge 47, Volunteer 6. Big-time victory for the Wolves over there to start the season. And, guys, they looked great on both sides of the ball. I know, Volunteer being a 4A school, Westridge being a 6A school, you still got to go out there and play, though. And Westridge was showing what they were capable of this year. And the biggest question mark surrounding this game here is how Trey Frazier, the senior quarterback for Westridge, would look after missing half the regular season last year. Guys, he looked excellent. He was great running the ball. He was great passing the ball. Trey Frazier finished 16 of 22 passing for 232 passing yards through 2 scores. Rushed 13 times for 84 yards and rushed in the end zone 2 times as well. The defense for Westridge got the job done too. They had 4 takeaways in that game, 2 fumble recoveries, 2 interceptions, one from Caleb Mabb and one from Dylan Bannon. Those 2 guys also on the offensive end had big receiving games. Bannon had 6 receptions for 84 yards. Mabb had 4 receptions for 90 yards and a score. And one of the biggest guys out there, Trent Tatum, of course, we've talked about him moving over to tight end. Man, he showed out. They didn't waste no time showing what his capabilities were at tight end, delivering a touchdown strike to him, first score of the game for Westridge on an 11-yard pass there from Frazier to, account for one of his 2 touchdowns through the air. And Tatum got it done on the defensive end as well. Had he swatted 2 balls right there at the line, had a few tackles, blocked an extra point. And this Westridge defense and the offense just all looked really, really good. And one thing I noticed about Westridge, we talked about the passing game and how Trey Frazier just, found his rhythm out there with the air attack, is we usually see Westridge getting it done on the ground, using that power run game to move the change. This time they were lined up in the spread, able to pass the ball around, just diamond out there, and Trey Frazier did a great job just leading this offense out there, guys. And I think, of course, this Wolves team could be something to reckon with in the 6A. They really showed it there. I mean, do y'all have any thoughts of what you all saw, or heard about with Westridge against Volunteer?
Well, quite honestly, like you said, Trey Frazier is back. Trent Tatum, we wondered how that would go, moving him to tight end. Coach has been very clear that he's going to pack 2 jerseys for each game for Westridge, one so he can be eligible at tight end, the other so he can be eligible on the offensive line if he's needed there. So the question is, can the offensive line hold up well enough for Trent Tatum to move to tight end? Week 1, the answer is a very definitive yes.
Yeah, offensive line looked great. The defensive line, too, looked great. And, the biggest question mark on that offensive line was those 3 sophomores that were thrown in there. They're kind of just thrown into the fire of this high school football now, getting some real experience there in the trenches. But they held up pretty well. Another offensive line that held up really, really well was Johnson County's offensive line against Sullivan East that night. Of course, Johnson County came away with the victory there, 53-7 over East. Andrew, you were there Friday covering that game, man. How about that triple option from Johnson County?
That triple option was very impressive for week 1. I talked with Rick Wilson after the game, and he was like, even I'm a little bit surprised at how well the reads were, how smooth everything was. And, I mean, it was truly impressive. We had 329 rushing yards from the Johnson County offense, 200 of them from Juan Mejia. Running back for the Longhorns. Really impressive day. He took the very first play from Johnson County scrimmage, 60 yards for a score, went untouched. Talk about the offensive line. Rick Wilson was very complimentary of the way his line was able to just open up a hole. And Juan Mejia is a special ball player, so he just hit the hole and never looked back, and neither did Johnson County. 39 points in the first half. Really just put a very strong stamp on that game. Meanwhile, for Sullivan East, though, definitely a game that showcased a little bit of the youth, to be expected. You have a sophomore starting quarterback in Peyton Lingerfelt. He had his moments where he looked pretty good. Made some good throws on out routes. Hayden Jones looked good, both out of the backfield and at receiver. But my thought with Peyton Lingerfelt, definitely saw a little bit of the youth, especially with his pocket presence. I feel like at times maybe a little bit happy feet, a little bit of eager to run, which is a young quarterback. That's just kind of the way they usually operate, especially a guy gifted athletically like Peyton Lingerfeld is. If I think I can get some yards running the ball, I'm going to try and run the ball. So definitely still learning the system, learning how to be comfortable, spreading them out, throwing it around. And, I think also youth-wise for Sullivan East defensively, we talked about the triple option for Johnson County. Defensively, you have to be very disciplined to defend any sort of option attack, especially the triple option attack. And there were definitely moments where Sullivan East kind of lacked a little bit of discipline. Young guys maybe not quite filling a hole where they needed to, saying an edge where they needed to. But overall, a long way to go, but definitely a growth that can happen for this Patriots team. It's just week 1. No need to panic quite yet for the Patriots.
Yeah, and Sullivan East, of course, they lost a record-breaking class last year statistically. They had some great guys, and that included quarterback Drake Fisher. So Peyton Lingerfeld's trying to find his rhythm there with that air raid offense. And it's kind of you look at the defensive side, it's almost like a bad matchup because you're going up against a Johnson County team that ran that triple option very effectively, and that triple option can be very hard to defend, especially for a young defense like East has. And, they're going to grow through the season. Like you said, they're a young team, but Johnson County, I couldn't imagine how fun that triple option was to watch out there. I mean, especially when you run it like that. They even broke out a play-action play out of it. It looked really good.
Yeah, no, I mean, it definitely was very, very smooth from the Longhorns. Everyone knows their assignments. Everybody knows where they need to be, what the reads are, what the keys are, and how to go execute that. And I'm excited to see what they'll do coming up this week against Hampton as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And a few other games in the area that happened last week. Of course, David Crockett had a come from behind win against South Green, big time week 1 win for David Crockett over there, 20-13 over South Green. Daniel Boone really ran into some trouble over there at Clyde A. Irwin in North Carolina. Of course, that was 56-0 against Daniel Boone. And then Unicoi County had a great week 1 win, 34-21 over Northview Academy, and Colby Jones, the quarterback over at Unicoi County, really showed what he's going to be capable of going into his junior year. He threw a couple of touchdown passes there. Guys, you see those games right there that in week 1, the other games that we could touch on. Do y'all have any thoughts on those games?
Well, just how fast Crockett is growing up. And A.J. Wynn being back, he had over 100 yards rushing, over 100 yards passing. And the biggest thing is, David Crockett, just to show their maturity, they scored 17 unanswered points. And this was a pretty good South Green team they're facing. A senior quarterback in Jacob Susong and a junior standout running back who would have had 1,000 yards last year had he not gotten hurt, that being Nash Rader, of course. But the backfield tandem of both A.J. Wynn and John Hall, both of them had over 100 yards. And with receivers like Zeke Sloan, LaMarcus Dunn, all those guys came up big time. Crockett is 1-0 and just – and that's got to be huge for them just after the way things went last year. And Daniel Boone, it started with an opening kickoff return, and then it just snowballed from there. So the Trailblazers, obviously very young, with sophomore quarterback in Cole Stevenson. There's going to be a learning curve there. So and of course there's always the Musket Bowl, and should Boone win the Musket Bowl, that opening game will become nothing more than a distant memory, of course. Colby Jones did what Colby Jones does, and you're going to be seeing his name just about every week in just about every sport throughout the school year for Unicoi County, if last year was any indication. So, guys, just overall a great week 1. Some of these really good games here.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we talk about Unicoi County, 34 points. I think we can continue to expect them to put up the touchdowns. I mean, last season in the month of October, they were putting up 40-plus points a game with Colby Jones back there.
And one team I didn't mention, the Happy Valley Warriors. Jeff's alma mater. Your alma mater's 1-0, and the Warriors reloaded on defense, pitched a shutout in their opening week, 19-0 at Happy Valley. And and that vaunted Cloudland rushing attack, it never really materialized. Happy Valley scored 3 touchdowns in the first quarter and just never looked back. So look out for the Warriors. They could be one of the dark horses in Northeast Tennessee. They've won 8 straight regular season games, by the way, guys.
Yeah, and Happy Valley's defense, there's no joke. Jeff, you got something to say about Happy Valley?
Well, I was going to say Happy Valley and Unicoi, obviously, they play this week, and you mentioned Colby Jones. He had 2 rushing touchdowns and 2 passing touchdowns. And Unicoi County's got some good athletes there. Got Garrett Sellers and got Coda Cutlip. And, and then like for Happy Valley, it's good to win anytime. It's always a tough rivalry there with Cloudland, Carter County battle, and to shut them out 19-0, pretty impressive in the first week.
Yeah, absolutely. And there you have some week 1 games of the Tennessee high school football season, and of course the opening week. You can check out also johnsоncitypress.com and timesnews.net. Check out some of those stories that we wrote up on the games, as well as some other quick stories on the other games that we did not touch in here in this podcast. But right now, we'd like to thank our sponsor, Lazy J Farms Old Fashioned Butcher Shop, for sponsoring the podcast.
Lazy J Farms has been raising the finest cattle and all-natural pork for 3 generations on the family farm in Fall Branch. Their blonde Aquitaine herd offers a leaner, healthier, and more tasteful beef. And the butcher shop is local, farm to table, and 100% authentic. This is the way your grandfather shopped for me, with steaks cut to order, quality assured, and ready to ship to your door. Open Thursday through Saturday on Bloomingdale Road in Kingsport. Come see us.
All right, y'all, now it's time for the Six Rivers Media Sports Huddle Game of the Week. For Week 2, we got Dobyns-Bennett at Greeneville. JD, you mentioned a little bit about this earlier. What do you got for us?
Well, this is going to be a televised game, 7:30 kickoff, so already we're going to have longer timeouts. Greeneville, of course, led by some guy named Quillen. Maybe you've heard of him. Carson Quillen, of course, the Virginia Tech baseball commit, and an all-everything for Greeneville. Running back, catching passes out of the backfield, safety. Dobyns-Bennett, of course, very familiar with him. He scored both of Greeneville's touchdowns against Dobyns-Bennett last year, a game that resulted in a no contest that was ended early due to lightning, which is unfortunate because that game was shaping up to be a classic there towards the end. That game, oddly enough, also a televised game. With Dobyns-Bennett being as short-handed as they are, you have to wonder, will Dobyns-Bennett want to go fast this week? They made the indication they want to go fast during the preseason, but I didn't really sense that last week, especially when the injuries started to mount up this past week. Now, quarterback Austin Sykes did an admirable job directing the offense, especially early and then especially in that fourth quarter when the Indians were down by a touchdown. Obviously more of a running quarterback, but he proved, and he can handle the big stage. The question is, will Dobyns-Bennett open it up and go deeper this time? Most of the passes that Dobyns-Bennett threw this past week was mostly short stuff, dump off passes, oftentimes to Peyton Franklin, the tight end, and a lot of times quick slants to guys like Dylan Murray. A couple of big third down conversion grabs by Dylan Murray in this past week's game. But just with Corday Moore now at running back, Austin Sykes directing the offense, the question is, just how can they hold up? Because when I think Greeneville, you think physicality on both sides of the football.
They understood in our scrimmages that we did we did okay in our scrimmages, and they understand that. And then the fact that we were going to play a very tough Farragut team, who's got a couple guys that have FCS, and one of them I guess has a Group of 5 offer. Everything, and that we could come out and go against these guys and perform like we did, and able to show a little mettle and a little toughness and persistence to come through. That was so great for our kids to learn. I'm glad, like I told you after the game, I'm glad we learned it with a W and not with an L. We're down to our fourth running back. That's not how we wanted to do the season, I can assure you that, but I like the guys we got. We'll go with Corday Moore there. He finished out the game. Thought Corday played really, really good. Proud of how he did. Parker DeFord is a kid that hasn't got to play there yet. He's a kid that has a little power to him. If he knows what to do and things like that, then we feel comfortable with him there. And then might see a little sophomore in there as well, Emmett Smith. So, That doesn't matter. It's not gonna be on the guy carrying the ball. It's gonna be on those 5 guys up front, and can they block that defensive core? We got guys that can get the yards at running back, but it's can we create the yards on the offensive line?
Dobyns-Bennett has dominated the all-time series against Greeneville, but you wouldn't know that by recent years. Greeneville has won the last 5, and guys, get this. How often do you get to say this? Greeneville's quarterback, Caden Baugh, he gets to chance to continue a streak that was started by his dad. Because Cody Baugh's senior year, 2002, Greeneville, of course, with a 19-10 win over Dobyns-Bennett that year. They didn't play again until 2017, and Greeneville has won every meeting since. So Greeneville's 5-game winning streak against the Indians started with some quarterback named Cody Baugh, and now, more than 2 decades later, his son, Caden Baugh, gets the chance to carry it on.
Yeah, and if you want to feel even older, that streak that started in 2002, obviously the last win for Dobyns-Bennett coming in 2001. Yours truly was not alive the last time Dobyns-Bennett beat Greeneville in this series for football. So apologies to all y'all out there that I just made feel very old, but it was something that I just couldn't help but notice whenever researching this game.
Yeah, and of course, this is a great point, Andrew. There, this is a great road test for Dobyns-Bennett. Early in the season, going over there to Greeneville, they were the number 2 team in the TSWA polls that came out. Greeneville was number 2 there in Class 4A, and what about the last time these two played? It was 21-20. Greeneville won on a failed 2-point conversion by Dobyns-Bennett.
Yeah, officially the last time they played.
Yeah.
And guess who stopped the 2-point conversion? Some guy named Quillen.
Yeah.
Have we mentioned him yet?
I don't think so, no.
So the last time they met was last fall, of course, in August. They played to a 14-14 tie, but, of course, we don't have ties in TWSAA football. So because Lightning ended the game early, it was a no contest. Obviously, with non-region game, it didn't have to be made up, which was a shame because it was shaping up to be a classic. And then the same thing happened to Greeneville like a week or 2 later. Lightning ended their game early against Alcoa, and what would have been a classic there at Burley Stadium ended up not even happening. So Greeneville ended up going 11-1, with an 8-0 regular season. And honestly, just in the 2 games that they lost were shaping up to be such good games. So you don't want to lose games like that. So hopefully the weather will cooperate with Greeneville this year because they deserve it.
Yeah, it was sad that Lightning just kind of vanished, 2 really, really good games last year for sure. Another 6A school that has a test with the 4A school, of course, the number four team in the state of Tennessee, Anderson County in 4A, will visit Science Hill. Jeff, you will be at that game. This is always a fun game for Science Hill. Of course, Anderson County brings in a lot to handle. What do you think the Hilltoppers can do to go 2-0?
It's going to be a tough game for sure. Science Hill pulled out a 26-23 win last year, and a guy we mentioned prominently in the Elizabethan game, Baylor Necessary, he actually had a couple touchdown runs in that game. Also had a couple big runs on fourth down. He had a 4th and 1. He busted through for a 31-yard gain, another time for a 20-yard gain. Expect him a big game from both sides of the ball. But Anderson County, a talented team. I know they stepped up in classification already, beat Powell, in week 1. Their Powell's a 5A school, and they stopped Anderson County early, but then they muffed a punt, and then after they did that, you don't want to give Anderson County second chances for sure, and then because then they ended up jumping out to like 14-3 lead, and then went on and won that game, and then they've got a quarterback, Landon Hensley, and he ended up throwing for 184 yards, 3 touchdowns last week. Good running back, Waylon LaRue. And then the star of the game was their wide receiver / defensive back, Israel Small. He's really a top prospect there, 6'1", 180 pounds, but he ended up with both a touchdown catch and an interception last week. But the things concerning Stacey Carter the very most, man, they got a huge offensive line. I mean, they've got some kids have transferred in there, and they've got led by this guy at right tackle, Elijah Dorton, who's 6'6" and 300 pounds. He's college size lineman there, but great, offensive line. They've got Ty Murphy there at center, and then they've got guard Jeremy Hall, Jackson Hill at left tackle, and Luke Carroll at right tackle, and all those guys are seniors other than Dorton. So just really going to be tough up front. We saw what Science Hill did last week against Elizabeth and with the 505 yards, but hard to duplicate that this week for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we talk about Greeneville and Dobyns-Bennett and Science Hill and Anderson County. Those got to be some of the best 4A versus 6A games in the state, especially early on to start the season. You get those in week 2. Some other week 2 games, we've got Daniel Boone at Westridge. You'll be at that one. And we got Crockett at Cherokee. That'll be a really fun one. And Richlands at Gate City. Of course, that's Scott County, Virginia there. And Virginia opens up week 1 of the season. Gate City getting ready to kick off their season there. Kind of question mark around who the quarterback will be there for the Blue Devils there at Gate City to open up the season. Y'all got anything to say about the other week 1 games, or week 2, games in Tennessee we have at Daniel Boone at Westridge, Crockett at Cherokee, either one of those?
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about the game I'll be at in Boone and Westridge. It's been a tight series, young series, only 2 on-field contests with a COVID win mixed in there as well. But it's a 2-1 Westridge series lead. Wolves won last year in Gray by 1 possession, 26-18. Big comeback efforts that was spearheaded by Chase Gill at running back, 10 carries for 63 yards and a touchdown last year. And you mentioned we were talking about Trey Frazier and Westridge before. We tend to know the Wolves for their running attack, but it looks like Trey Frazier back healthy, going to spread it around a little bit more. And it's going to be key for Daniel Boone to limit explosive plays in that passing attack. Last week, taking on Clyde Irwin, Boone, of the 6 offensive touchdowns that Irwin scored, 4 of them were 35-plus yarders. So just for Boone, they've got to play deep, keep everything in front of them, be a sure tackling team against Westridge if they want to hang around, get the win on the road. Obviously, you'll need Cole Stevenson to be a big game quarterback. Something that he's young, he needs to prove that he can do, and I think he ultimately can, but it's another big test this week for him at Westridge.
Yeah, they should be more prepared for this one. And, of course, we have a battle of unbeatens with David Crockett going over there to Big Red Valley to play Cherokee. JD, what do you think about that? That's a pretty fun game there.
Well, not just a battle of unbeatens, the battle of the comeback kids.
Yeah.
Both of these teams were down by double-digit points in their Week 1 games, and they came back and won. Cherokee, of course, fell behind Adcock County by 2 touchdowns, came back to win 35-28. Cherokee, speaking of momentum, they've won 5 of their last 6 games, for what that's worth. So, and then David Crockett, of course, like we mentioned, down 13-3, comes back to win 20-13. So neither one of these teams is going to back down from anything. They showed that in Week 1, and it's a battle of 2 young, well, not really young in Cherokee's case, but experienced quarterbacks, Landon Jeffers, and that receiving core he has, good heavens. And then not to mention A.J. Wynn and Crockett. And so I'm really interested to see how that goes. It'll be a good road test for A.J. It was the only he beat the Cherokee Chiefs last year, even threw a touchdown to his brother, A.J. Wynn, who's now, of course, at Western Illinois. But just that's one of those games you circle and just you see what these teams are made of.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know we touched on it earlier. I forgot to mention it just a minute ago. Unicoi County and Happy Valley. Jeff, you got to be excited for this one, of course. Happy Valley playing Unicoi County there. 2 great teams, 2 unbeaten teams. Offenses look good, defenses look good. What are you excited for?
Well, and I mean, just the rivalry itself, you go back to when I was in high school there, that was always the biggest rivalry game of the year was Unicoi County and Happy Valley. And, that one still has a lot of intensity, even though they're not in the same conferences anymore. I think the key for Happy Valley, sort of like, Andrew was talking about a little earlier with the Boone Westridge game. I mean, you've got to get some pressure there on Colby Jones because, I mean, he can light you up. I mean, the thing is he can beat you with his legs or his arm. JD mentioned he's just such a good athlete in any sport he plays. I mean, he's one of the best basketball players around the area, good baseball player, so that's going to be a key for them. And those receivers, like I mentioned, Coda Cutlip in particular, I think, could be a bad matchup for Happy Valley. So that'll be the thing. They're going to have to get some pressure on that Unicoi offense and slow them down. Yeah, for sure. And I'll be over there at Richlands at Gate City, as I said, kicks off the Week 1 of the Virginia high school football season to open up the year against Richlands. And, of course, we got Rye Cove. They're crossing the border to play Hancock County, and Twin Springs will invite Northwood over there to kick off Week 1 for their season. And I know I mentioned it about who quarterback 1 will be for the Blue Devils of Gate City. You got freshman Zane Reed, sophomore Caden Housewright, and senior Jackson Jones that were all in that QB competition there during the offseason. And, of course, Coach Jeremy Housewright, he didn't come to a decision yet when I spoke to him, and he said you probably won't know who the quarterback's going to be until Week 1. So I'm really curious to see who's thrown out there under center for the Blue Devils. Of course, Richland and Gate City, since head coach Jeremy Housewright has taken over, has been back and forth since Housewright's taken over. And, of course, the Blue Devils are coming off back-to-back 8-4 seasons, looking to keep that momentum going. Guys, are there any other games in the area that I forgot to mention that you all would like to touch on?
I mean, for me, I mentioned Johnson County, talked about their Week 1 game. Staying on the road this week, they're taking on Hampton. That's talk about local rivalries. I don't think Johnson County, at least in terms of the way that community feels, I don't know if they necessarily have a bigger rival than the Hampton Bulldogs down on the other side of the Watauga Lake.
Yeah.
Well, and the thing on that rivalry, Hampton, a lot of people always consider the Hampton-Cloudland rivalry. But as far as competitiveness, actually the Hampton-Johnson County rivalry has been a little better over the years, And those little bigger school there, Johnson County, you got to see him. Mahia's just terrific running back and all. But we always know how tough those Hampton kids are, even Andrew there. He's one of them tough Hampton kids there, so we see that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, there's a little bit of a preview for Week 2 for Tennessee high school football. And, of course, you had a little bit of Week 1 for Virginia high school football there. Also, visit johnsоncitypress.com and timesnews.net to get all of the Week 2 action for Tennessee and all the Week 1 action for Virginia high school football. Check out our stories there. And, guys, I think we'll wrap it up here. That was a little bit of the Week 1 action, and Week 2 coming up. We'd like to thank Lazy J Farms Old Fashioned Butcher Shop for sponsoring the podcast. Thank you all so much. Make sure you all check them out, see what they got cooking over there at Lazy J Farms. And we'll catch you all next week. Follow us all season long for the football action here in the region on the Sports Huddle podcast by Six Rivers Media.
The Lazy J Farms tailgate box offers great value all season long. Get 40 pounds of meat for only $110. That's 5 pounds of beef patties and 3 pounds of chicken breasts. 1 pound of thick cut bacon, 3 packs of premium beef hot dogs, and 2 packs of Chicago dogs, and 4 pounds of thick cut pork chops, all for $110 at Lazy J Farms Butcher Shop in Kingsport. Visit us online at lazyjbeef.com.